सर्वोपनिषदो गावः दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्स सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत् स्वधर्म ज्ञान वैराग्य साध्य भक्त्यैक गोचरः नारायण परं ब्रह्म गीताशास्त्रे समीरितः अस्थान स्नेह कारुण्य धर्माधर्म दियाकुलं पार्थं प्रपन्नमुद्दिश्य शास्त्रावतरणं कृतम्. With Krishna's grace, we have all embarked on the journey of Gita. Last session, we relished an introduction to the Gita and we set the stage to start relishing the summaries of all the 18 chapters of the Gita. Gita comprises of 18 chapters, which can be divided into 3 segments. And each segment has a central theme. The first segment of the Gita deals with the sadhanas of Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga, with the goal of Atma Sakshatkara. The second segment of the Gita, the second Shadga, deals with the sadhana of Bhakti Yoga, the goal being Paramatma Sakshatkara. The third hexad deals with summarizing, clarifying, and concluding all the teachings of the Gita, giving us a coherent framework to understand Tattva Hita Purusharthas. Tattva being ultimate reality, Hita being the means, Purushartha being the ultimate goal of life and living. The first chapter of the Gita is called Arjuna-vishāda yoga. We may all wonder, how can the sacred text, the most sacred text of Sanatana Dharma begin with Vishāda? Arjuna-vishāda yoga. And many times we may overlook the first chapter, looking at it as simply setting the scene in the battlefield. And many times we straightaway jump into the second chapter, which begins with Krishna's teachings. But we need to understand the significance of the very first chapter of the Gita. It sets the stage. It serves as a launching pad for us to begin the exploration of life's most important questions. Only when we study the first chapter, we get to understand the fundamental questions that we most often fail to ask ourselves. So therefore, today we are here to look at the overview of Arjuna-vishāda yoga. Asthana sneha karunya dharma adharma diyakulam partham prapannamuddishya shastrāvataranam kritam. Shastrāvatarana, the advent of Gita, is captured by the summary shloka from the Gītartha Sangraha. Arjuna was in a state of confusion, delusion of what is right and wrong, dharma and adharma. He was unable to discriminate. He faced a crisis of unimaginable proportions. And he was paralyzed, unable to make any decisions. Now, the significance of the first chapter can be understood through the acronym vision, which sets the stage for us to explore 6 key ingredients that shapes our vision of life. The first ingredient being values. We are all choice makers, making choices all the time. Every decision that we take are connected with our own value system. And whether we realize it or not, our values drive our choices, the decisions that we make. And Arjuna was torn apart. There was a clash of values within him. The clash of values was possibly more tumultuous than the battlefield itself. The first chapter sets the stage where we see the clash of values within Arjuna. The second ingredient, which starts off, the exploration starts off in the first chapter, is insights, I. The first chapter enables us to look at the most important question in life. What matters most in life? We normally do not reflect on this fundamental question. What really matters in life? What is the meaning of life? So therefore, the insight to getting an answer to this question, that exploration starts off in the very first chapter. The third ingredient, seeking wisdom, S. Many times we think when we are in an emergency, we need to take immediate action. No doubt. But we also need to understand that emergencies demand deep humility, to also be aware that we may not be adequately prepared to do what is required to be done. And we may need to seek wisdom of our Shastras. Now, Arjuna, after going through the grief, had the wisdom to seek guidance from Krishna. And therefore, the third ingredient of seeking wisdom, the first chapter sets the stage where Arjuna, after going through a contemplation on certain fundamental questions that plagued him, was in a position to seek counsel. The fourth ingredient, I, inner healing. The message of the Gita not only addresses our mind, not only addresses our intelligence, it also addresses our hearts. There is philosophy and there is also compassion. The message of the Gita is founded on unconditional love. Arjuna's bruised, battered heart is healed through Krishna's message. The fifth ingredient is open-minded reflection. Krishna enables Arjuna to reflect, contemplate on the challenges ahead. And it is very important for the journey, for any journey, to be founded on the ingredient of open-minded reflection. And the sixth ingredient in nurturing growth. Nurturing growth, as in any journey, it is very important for us to nurture. The first chapter sets the stage for Arjuna's transformation. Now we see a crisis within a crisis. War itself is a crisis of unimaginable proportions. But we see within the crisis another crisis. Arjuna has an inner crisis. And every crisis also presents an opportunity for growth. The first chapter demonstrates how in every Vishada, embedded in every Vishada, is an opportunity for Vijaya. Gita is a journey from Vishada to Vijaya. Every crisis has presents us an opportunity for growth. The word crisis itself has the answer. There is in crisis. When we start asking what is instead of what if, that is when we can actually start to find solutions to every problem that we face. Most often, we lead with the question, what if? And this question, what if, leads to all kinds of complexities. We are gripped with fear. We start to imagine things and we are perennially in a state of fear because of the unknown, the uncontrollable, the unpredictable nature of the world around. Therefore, the first chapter of the Gita sets the stage, serves as a launching pad to shape our vision, because after all, vision is so very important. It acts like a compass to guide us. It is our vision that guides us in our life, and therefore it becomes very important to have the right vision. And the first chapter of the Gita helps us to start shaping our vision, exploring all these 6 ingredients. It seems there was this young lady who was in her university, and then she comes home and goes to her father. She's quite dejected, very stressed, and says, "Dad, I give up. Day after day, I keep struggling. I don't know what to say. I only see problems all around. I keep fighting, I keep struggling. I just cannot manage the stress. I just give up, Dad." The dad was a wise man. He calmly took her along with him to the kitchen. And then he picked up 3 pots and started boiling 3 pots of water. And in the first pot, he put a carrot. In the second pot, he put an egg. And in the third pot, he put some coffee beans. And he let the water boil in all the 3 pots. After 20 minutes or so, then he switched off the stove, and then he put the contents on the table. He transferred the contents to 3 bowls. And he looked at his daughter and said, "What do you see?" The daughter is already frustrated. She looked at it and said, "What do you think? Carrots, egg, and coffee beans. What do you expect me to answer?" The dad smiled and said, "Why don't you feel the carrot?" She went ahead and she touched and felt the carrot. It was very soft. And he said, "Why don't you feel the egg and peel the layer?" She went and touched the egg and she found the inside very hard. And then he gave the third bowl. "Why don't you taste it?" It was aromatic. Coffee tasted very nice. And then the dad looked at his daughter and said, "What do you think?" She did not understand what's going on. She looked at the dad and said, "Dad, please explain." Then the wise man said, "You know what? All 3 of them faced the same adversity. 100 degrees boiling water. Carrot, egg, coffee bean. All of them faced the same adversity. The carrot, which was hard, relentless, when was put in the boiling water, became soft and weak. The egg, which was soft with a hard shell, when it was put in the boiling water, became very rigid and hard within Whereas the coffee bean was unique. When it was put in the boiling water, it transformed the water to taste, to give it taste, fragrance, aroma. Father looked at his daughter and said, "What do you want to be? Carrot, an egg, or the coffee bean?" When faced with adversity, all three behaved differently. It is the coffee bean which transformed the situation, added fragrance, and overcome what is supposed to have been a challenging situation. Arjuna was like the carrot, hard, relentless, strong, and when he faced the adversity of the war, he broke down. He broke down and he was unable to handle himself. Arjuna, the valiant archer, was the most skilled archer, warrior. On the battlefield of Kurukshetra, was unable to make a choice between whether he should engage and fight the war or disengage and walk away. He was unable to discriminate between what is dharma and adharma on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. The first chapter of the Gita presents us the battlefield scenario where the Pandavas and Kauravas face each other. Arjuna requests, commands Krishna to take him right to the middle of the battlefield. And that is where the trouble begins. Arjuna gives 4 reasons as to why he should not fight the war. He gives both personal and social reasons. Arjuna starts to teach Krishna what is dharma. He starts to present all kinds of arguments, both personal and social. He says, "Hey Krishna, if I engage in this war, what is the point in winning the war and gaining the riches if I end up killing so many people? Is it really worth killing so many people in order to gain the kingdom?" And he goes on to say, what would happen if I kill all these who are in front of me? The papa karma that I would end up accruing would ensure that I only go to hell. Why should I be doing this? Isn't this a sinful activity, engaging in war and killing people? And then he also presents the Kula Dharma of the Kshatriyas, Kshatriya Dharma and Kula Dharma, and says, "Hey Krishna, how can I fight against my own grandfather? How can I fight against my own Kulaguru? How can I fight against my own relatives?" Giving all these reasons, Arjuna says, "I give up. I cannot now decide. I cannot fight this war." The first chapter of the Gita enables us also to explore the cause of this war. For that matter, cause of any dispute, cause of any conflict, cause of any fight. In our own life and living, if we have to look at the cause of any conflict, of any fight, immediately we come up with an issue. We state an issue which happens to be the cause of any conflict, any fight. But then the issue that is identified is only the tip of an iceberg. Because the actual cause is normally not stated, remains unstated, is not easily apparent. Just like how the cause for the war of Kurukshetra The war between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, the cause that can be stated is territorial dispute. The issue is a territorial dispute over the kingdom. But is that the real cause? It's only a tip of the iceberg. The actual cause is not the issue. The actual cause for any conflict is not the issue, it is the people with issues. It is the people with issues which is the actual cause for any conflict, for any fight. In the case of the war of Kurukshetra, we know the cause. It is Dhritarashtra. It is Dhritarashtra's attachment to Duryodhana. Territorial, if it was the cause was only territorial dispute, it could have been easily resolved because Pandavas were so very accommodating. Any issue is resolvable, but people with issues requires a lot of resolve to solve. Not easy at all. Dhritarashtra's attachment was like a cancer that completely made him irrational. He lost his own sense of what his duty is. And in that process, he became a major cause for this massive war that ensued. The battlefield setting of the Gita demonstrates its core teaching. Many times we wonder, how can a text on philosophy, profound philosophy, is taught through the Gita, but it is set in the battlefield? Why is it so? The battlefield setting of the Gita demonstrates its core teaching. When we look at the war from both sides, Arjuna and Duryodhana, both were disturbed. Both Arjuna and Duryodhana were disturbed. The first part of chapter 1 is all about both of them observing their armies and the other armies. Duryodhana was very, very optimistic, that he was so arrogant that he assumed victory is his. Based on his own numerical strength, the numerical strength of the Kaurava army, Duryodhana assumed that the Kauravas are going to win. But then when he looked at the impressive battle formation of the Pandavas, he was shaken, he was disturbed. Duryodhana was disturbed because of his fear of defeat, fear of his own life. On the other hand, Arjuna was also disturbed. Arjuna's disturbance was caused by fear of loss of lives. This is one fundamental difference between Duryodhana and Arjuna. Arjuna also was in fear, but his fear was fear of loss of lives, not his life, loss of other lives. In the case of Duryodhana, his was fear of loss of his own life and also fear of defeat. Both were disturbed, but then the way they reacted to the disturbance is so very different. Their reactions are so very different. And their dispositions are so very different. And therefore, their differing dispositions also reveal their differing destinations. Duryodhana, the moment he was shaken, he started engaging in political maneuvering. That was his default behavior. He started political maneuvering in order to see how to somehow rally around his forces to ensure they can win over the Pandavas by hook or crook. On the other hand, Arjuna, being shaken, when he looked at the army and he was shaken too because of loss of lives, for a moment he was not sure whether he should fight or not fight, and eventually he took shelter of Krishna. In the case of Duryodhana, he ignored Krishna completely. We see in the first chapter, Duryodhana looks at the army of the Pandavas and he starts naming all the Rathis, Maharathis and Atirathis as he talks to Drona. He names everyone, but he ignores Krishna. He assumes that Krishna anyway is not armed and he is not engaged in war. Therefore, what impact he is going to make? He ignores the Supreme Krishna who is right there. And it is this ignorance of Duryodhana that triggered his downfall in the war. On the other hand, Arjuna recognized Krishna and Krishna alone as the foremost, and he took his shelter. So the battlefield setting demonstrates the core teaching of the Gita, where later on we see in the 16th chapter Krishna divides humans into two categories: Daivi, Asuri, the divine and the demoniac. Those who are demoniac, Asuri in nature, they completely ignore Bhagavan. When they are presented with any problem, they count on their own capabilities, and in that and it is their ego which drives their decisions. And in that process, they are in constant struggle, struggling against the laws of nature. On the other hand, the divine, like Arjuna, they seek divine counsel and they turn to Krishna, surrender to him, take his shelter, and it is with Krishna's guidance they lead their lives. There are one class of people who are only looking at gifts in life. There are the other class of people who recognize the gift of life and eventually the gift giver, Krishna. So the battlefield setting enables us to learn the core teaching of the Gita. Another important aspect of the first chapter of the Gita is how the hero gets introduced. Now, we all are used to Bollywood, Hollywood, Kollywood, Tollywood, whatever would we call, right? Introduction of the hero. It's a very momentous occasion. Any movie we go to, right? Every hero is introduced in a different way. Depending on the hero, the way the introduction happens is very dramatic. Gita also dramatically introduces the hero of all heroes. Tatashveter hayer yukte mahati syandane stithau madavah pandavas chaiva shankau dadmau pradadmatuhu. This is the introduction of the hero happening in the Gita. In a very unique way it happens. The hero gets introduced in a way that we don't expect. It's a very, very different way of introducing the hero. Tatashveter hayer yukte mahati syandane stithau. It seems it was a magnificent chariot drawn by white horses. Shveter hayer yukte mahati syandane stithau. A magnificent chariot on the battlefield of Kurukshetra is present, and as the chariot comes in, the chariot is magnificent, but the sight on the chariot is even more magnificent. Seated on that magnificent chariot are Krishna, the charioteer, and Partha. But what is very surprising here in this hero introduction is the role reversal. An unexpected role reversal. The hero, who is the savior, happens to be in a subordinate position, happens to be the charioteer. And the one who is going to be saved, Arjuna, happens to be being the one who is in a superior position. The Supreme, the Purushottama, out of love for Arjuna, decides to take such a lowly position as a charioteer. This introduction of Krishna in the Gita has a very important teaching, very important lesson. It shows, it demonstrates the love that defines divinity. This introduction of Krishna in the Gita also demonstrates his loving disposition and the centrality of love in his revelation. The whole message of Gita is founded on love, Krishna's unconditional love. That is why this nectarine song of Gita is a song of love. Bhagavan's unconditional love. Arjuna represents each and every one of us. And we see through this introduction that Bhagavan is so very accessible, available, ready to do anything and everything that we want him to do for our sake, demonstrating his unconditional love for us. Throughout the first chapter of the Gita, Krishna is almost silent. Krishna almost doesn't speak. Why I say almost? He just says one sentence, and that too is recounted by Sanjaya. We don't have a direct statement coming from Krishna throughout the first chapter. In spite of Krishna not speaking, the first chapter, like every other chapter of the Gita, is called Krishna-Arjuna Samvada. Gita is a samvada. Samvada, a conversation between Arjuna and Krishna. Every chapter is called a samvada because Krishna asks questions, Arjuna patiently answers. So the whole of Gita is samvada. Every chapter is a samvada. Now, every other chapter as a samvada is understandable because Krishna speaks at length. Arjuna keeps asking questions on our behalf. But the first chapter is also called samvada. Krishna doesn't speak. Why is it called a samvada? Arjuna is continuously speaking, going on speaking. Krishna enables Arjuna to speak up. He enables Arjuna to express himself through his complete presence. Krishna ensures his 100% presence, his attention to Arjuna. His total presence and the comfort that he gives to Arjuna enables Arjuna to express himself fully. Now, in any conversation, the conversation involves both verbal and non-verbal communication. Many times we think communication is only verbal. More than verbal, the non-verbal part of any communication becomes a lot more important and significant. So therefore, even though there are no dialogues for Krishna in the whole of first chapter, it is still called a samvada because he is still engaged fully, 100% through his complete presence. Bhishma Drona, in the presence of Bhishma and Drona, Sanjaya says, Bhishma Drona Pramukataha. In the presence of Bhishma and Drona, it seems, Uvacha Partha Pashyaitan, Samavetan Kuruniti. This is the only statement that Krishna makes, and this is what Sanjaya recounts throughout in the first chapter. This is the only statement that Krishna makes. What is that only statement? He Partha Pashya Samavetan Kuruniti. Samavetan Kuruniti. The Kurus have assembled here. Pashya. See. Very interesting statement. We need to spend some time here to understand the significance of what Krishna says here. The only statement that Krishna makes throughout the first chapter, 46 shlokas, one statement that Krishna makes. Uvacha Partha Pashyaitan Samavetan Kuruniti. Arjuna asks Krishna, hey Krishna, take me to the middle of the battlefield and I want to see the opposing army. Now, in order to fulfill Arjuna's desire, Senayor Ubhayor Madhye Ratam Sthapayamechyuta. This is what Arjuna wants. Senayor Ubhayor Madhye. In between the two senas, take me to the middle. Arjuna did not specify where exactly. He just said, take me to the middle. What did Krishna do? Krishna nicely takes Arjuna all the way to the middle of the battlefield and stops right in front of Bhishma and Drona. And he says, hey Arjuna, I have brought you here. Pashya, now see. He is making Arjuna see Bhishma and Drona. Essentially provoking Arjuna, look at what is at stake. First message to Arjuna is, hey Arjuna, this is not the time for seeing. This is time for action. You want to see? You should have started acting. We are on the battlefield. Time for action, but you want to see. Fine, you wanted to see? I brought you. Now see. Everybody is ready on the battlefield to fight. So therefore, enough of seeing, let's go start to fight. That's the first message. Now, if Krishna wouldn't have brought Arjuna right in front of Bhishma and Drona, we would have been deprived of the wisdom of Gita. So Krishna used Arjuna as a vyaja because he knows what is going to happen the moment Arjuna sees Bhishma and Drona. The dearest, the most venerable for Arjuna, when he sees Bhishma and Drona, he will realize what is at stake on this battlefield. So therefore, Krishna brings Arjuna right up front so that Arjuna will start asking the big questions. What really matters in life? The trigger for Arjuna to start asking questions is this trigger. Uvacha Partha Pashyaitan. Hey Partha, Pashya. See, no, Krishna, there are several Leelas of Krishna we see throughout his avatara, but the greatest of all Leelas is the Leela of Gita. And this Leela begins right here. No, he takes him all the way. Arjuna wanted to look at the armies, but Krishna ensures that he sees right, Bhishma and Drona. Then he says, Arjuna, is it enough? Have you seen enough? Can we go back? He knows now Arjuna is going to ask all the kinds of questions that are going to be the trigger for the advent of Gita. What is important here also is Krishna knows that by saying Pashya He Partha, he wants to also start teaching a very important lesson to Arjuna and all of us. The lesson of the danger of Pratyaksha Pramana. What do I mean by that? Pratyaksha is perception. What we see. When we engage with this world, the world enters us through our eyes. Generally speaking, broadly speaking, the world enters us through the eyes. Interestingly, the world maker often enters only through our ears, not through our eyes. The world enters through our eyes, but Krishna enters only through our ears. Why? Because we cannot easily see him. Now we may say that, yes, he is so very compassionate. Through his archa, we are able to see him, his form. But then, when we see his archa, our faith in the archa will be only strengthened when we start to hear about him through the Shastra. So, Shabda Pramana is so very important. That is why even today, many people keep going on asking about the significance of worshipping deities, worshipping archa murtis, because they do not have the foundation of the Shastras. So, generally speaking, Bhagavan enters us through our ears. That is why Shrotavyaha, Mantavyaha, Nididhyasitavyaha, Trashtavyaha. If we need to see him, we need to go through a process. We just cannot see him just like that. Most of us want to see Krishna. Most of us. don't we? But then we need to realize that we can see him if we go through the process recommended by the Shastras. Shrotavyaha, mantavyaha, nidhityasitavyaha, drashtavyaha. Listen to what the Shastras say. Shrotavyaha, reflect, contemplate, experience, realize, see, attain. Step by step process. Whereas the world, which is Maya, enters easily through our eyes. Now, perception, now Maya is an illusion, but it is an illusion in conception, not in perception. Why I say that? What we see is real, but our conception of what we see is where the illusion is, because what we see is not permanent. Everything is what we see is subject to the law of impermanence. Keeps changing all the time. We may not notice it, but every moment things are changing. Anything that we can see is changing continuously, including our body. Every moment the body is changing. We see the changes over a period of time, but everything that we can perceive with our senses is subject to change, is subject to the law of impermanence. It's going to decay and get destroyed. The form is going to change. So therefore, here pratyaksha is important, is real, but not sufficient. Is necessary but not sufficient. We need the support of Shabda to strengthen our pratyaksha. The same Krishna, for some people, when we look at Krishna, the Divya Mangala Vigraha may not evoke that sense of bhakti if we do not know him. But how do we know him? Through the Shastra, through Shabda. We need to start listening. We need to start listening. The more we get to know about him and know him, our love for him grows, and therefore then we start seeing him. But pratyaksha by itself can become challenging. This is what Krishna, by bringing Arjuna to the middle of the battlefield saying, hey Partha Pashya, he also knows, because what Arjuna sees is going to change how he is going to see. What Arjuna saw changed how he saw. How do we understand this? What we see changes how we see. Why do I say that? Arjuna, until then, was looking at the army and he was saying they are all allies of Duryodhana. But the moment he saw Bhishma and Drona, what he saw changed how he saw. Immediately he says, Drishtvevam Swajanam Krishna. Those, the allies of Arjuna became Swajana, which means my relatives. The moment he saw what he saw, how he saw changed, which means we cannot depend on our eyes to drive our vision. If we let our eyes drive our vision of life, we are always misdirected. Because eyes have limitations. Our perception has limitations. What we see has limitations. What we see cannot dictate how we see things. How we see things, we need to use our intelligence, and this intelligence has to be strengthened by Shastra. Arjuna looks at Bhishma, Drona, and suddenly looks at everybody who is standing there, now are no longer allies of Duryodhana, they are all his relatives. Dushtvevam Swajanam Krishna Yuyutsam Samupastitam Sidanti Mama Gatrani Mukham cha Parishishyati. Sidanti Mama Gatrani, his legs started to shake. Hey Krishna, Sidanti Mama Gatrani Mukham cha Parishishyati. My mouth is drying up. Vepatushya Shariram me Roma Harshasta Jayate. My skin is burning. My hair is standing on. I have horripilations all over. I do not know what's going on. Hey Krishna, my heart is racing. I'm unable to control myself. I'm sinking, and deep, deep, deep is going to an abyss of despair, despondency. Arjuna is struck by unimaginable grief. Why? Because now he sees, what he sees is bodily relationships. Now that he lets that shape his vision, and therefore Arjuna allows himself to get into a crisis. Allows himself to get into a crisis, and the crisis that is described in the first chapter, the crisis is, we see three dimensions, three levels of dilemmas. Again, very relevant to us in our day-to-day lives. The first chapter presents three levels of agonizing dilemmas: emotional dilemmas, ethical dilemma, existential dilemma. And we can relate to Arjuna's these three dilemmas very easily. Emotional dilemma. On the one hand, Arjuna was jubilant. As he entered the battlefield, he was jubilant, joyful. And the moment he was in the middle looking at Bhishma, Drona and everybody else, he was overcome with agony, apprehension, clash of emotions. There was an emotional dilemma. He was torn apart, not knowing what to do. All of us go through these clash of emotions all the time. Emotional dilemma, ethical dilemma. Arjuna had two duties to do. The duty as a kshatriya, which means to fight the war, and the duty as belonging to the clan of Kurus. Kshatriya dharma, Kula dharma. These two dharmas were in conflict. If he adopts Kula dharma, he cannot fight the war. He has to protect his own race. But if he adopts the Kshatriya dharma, he has to fight against his own relatives. So he was torn apart. Suddenly he sees that the boundaries seem to be all messed up. The ethical boundaries, he's stopped seeing clear ethical boundaries. Ethical dilemma. How many times we come across conflict in the various duties that we need to perform. And the third level, the third dilemma, existential dilemma. Now, all of us have this longing to survive, and we struggle to survive. But we also have this longing to find a meaning to our survival. After all, if there is no meaning to our survival, then it is only existence, it is not living. Now, Arjuna has this existential dilemma. Now, if he has to survive, he has to kill. Now, if he has to win the kingdom over, he has to kill his relatives. He has to kill Bhishma. He has to kill Drona. He has to kill every relative. And if he ends up killing those relatives, then when he wins the kingdom, the very people whom he wanted to be ruling and be with him, supporting, will all be gone. So there is an existential dilemma that Arjuna sees. And the first chapter of the Gita plays all these dilemmas, and we're going to see how Krishna is going to help address each of these dilemmas, help Arjuna make the right decisions. So the first chapter thus sets the stage for the journey of the Gita. No, the first chapter does not just end with 46 shlokas of the first chapter alone, because Krishna still has not started his teaching. Krishna starts his teaching in the second chapter. Before he starts teaching, right up front in the second chapter, Krishna makes a very blunt statement. He sees Arjuna sinking into the abyss of trauma. He sees Arjuna in a state of emergency. He looks at Arjuna and says, Kutastva kashmamedam vishame samupastitam anarya jushtamasvagyam akirtikaram Arjuna. He says, Kutastva kashmalamidam. Hey Arjuna, what? How come these impurities of mind has overcome you? This is unbecoming of you. You are a noble warrior and you are not this person that I know. And he says, Vishame samupastitam. Arjuna wanted to know what is right and wrong. Vishame, at this juncture, Krishna completely changes the question. He says, it is not the time now. He brings in the dimension of time, Vishame. Arjuna wants what is right and wrong. Krishna says, forget about what is right and wrong. Let's discuss what is the right timing and wrong timing. It is wrong timing for you to raise this question. Before the war, you could have said whether I should fight or not. We could have easily discussed. We are on the battlefield. Vishame samupastitam he Arjuna. This is the wrong timing. By bringing in the dimension of time, Krishna halts Arjuna's momentum of destructive thinking. Arjuna is going in the wrong direction. He needs to be arrested. His thought process, negative thinking has to be arrested. And he makes a blunt statement and pokes his ego. Krishna does two things right in the beginning of the second chapter. He pokes Arjuna's ego and says, hey Arjuna, this is not you. And then immediately he says, this is not the right time. Thus he stops Arjuna's thinking process. Then and there, Arjuna then realizes. Arjuna was sinking in an abyss of trauma. With Krishna's help now, he looks up. And then Arjuna says, hey Krishna, I surrender to you. I cannot make this decision. I want you to help me make this decision. Karpanya dosho upakata swabhavaha prichamitvam dharma sammuda chetaha yashrehasya nishitam bruhitan me shishyasteham shadimam tvam prapannam. Accept me as your sishya. Please tell me what is right, what is wrong. Please help me see what is dharma, what is adharma. I am confused. I am deluded. You are my only refuge. This marks the beginning of the teachings in the Gita. So, for all practical purposes, the Gita begins, Krishna's teachings begins with the 10th shloka of the second chapter. Until then, we can say it is arjuna-vishāda yoga. Tamuvacha hrishikesha prahasanniva bharata. Sanjaya immediately writes, prahasanniva bharata senayor ubhayor madhye vishidantam idam vachaha. He says, the moment Arjuna surrendered to Krishna, it seems Krishna smiled. Prahasanniva bharata senayor ubhayor madhye vishidanta idam vachaha. Before starting his teachings, it seems Krishna smiled. What a smile. Why he smiled? What is the reason for his smile? And what is that he is going to tell Arjuna? We will see from Shloka 211 in the second chapter. Until then, let us continue to contemplate on Krishna's smile. Let us not end. No, I thought we will end with the first chapter, but then we will end with Arjuna's agony. And for 1 month, contemplating on Arjuna's agony is the wrong thing to do for all of us. So therefore, I extended the first chapter into the second chapter until Shloka 210, so that we can end with not Arjuna's agony, but Krishna's smile. Prahasanniva bharata senayor ubhayor madhye vishidantam idam vachaha. What an enchanting, electrifying smile. Let us continue to contemplate on Krishna's smile, and when we come back, we have great news. The Gita begins with Krishna's profound teachings. Second chapter, Sankhya Yoga, we will relish it next month. Until then, Prahasanniva Bharata, Krishna's beautiful smile. Let's continue to contemplate. Jai Sri Krishna.